Hello, and welcome back to Story Time with Zimmer. I've decided to take a little break from reading raw adult classics. Don't worry, I'll get back to them soon. But this week, I decided to plan something really exciting for everybody. For everybody who's enjoyed classics like those of James Marshall, including George and Martha, Miss Nelson, The Stupids, I've decided to read some of his classics instead. Because he was a great writer, and illustrator for that matter. Very unique illustration style. And I've decided to start off by reading you Miss Nelson, all three of them. Starting with the one that started it all. Miss Nelson is Missing by Harry Allard and illustrated by James Marshall. You ready? Alright, let's begin. The kids in room 207 were misbehaving again. Spitballs stuck to the ceiling. Paper planes whizzed through the air. They were the worst behaved class in the whole school. Now settle down, said Miss Nelson in a sweet voice. But the class would not settle down. They whispered and giggled. They squirmed and made faces. They were even rude during story hour. And they always refused to do their lessons. Something will have to be done, said Miss Nelson. The next morning, Miss Nelson's did not come to school. Wow, yelled the kids. Now we can really act up. They began to make more spitballs and paper planes. Today, let's be just terrible, they said. Not so fast, hissed an unpleasant voice. A woman in an ugly black dress stood before them. I am your new teacher, Miss Viola Swamp, and she rapped the desk with her ruler. Where is Miss Nelson? Asked the kids. Never mind that, snapped Miss Swamp. Open those arithmetic books. Miss Nelson's kids did as they were told. They could see that Miss Swamp was a real witch. She meant business. Right away she put them to work, and she loaded them down with homework. We'll have no story hour today, said Miss Swamp. Keep your mouth shut, said Miss Swamp. Sit perfectly still, said Miss Swamp. And if you misbehave, you'll be sorry, said Miss Swamp. The kids in room 207 had never worked so hard. Days went by and there was no sign of Miss Nelson. The kids missed Miss Nelson. Maybe we should try to find her, they said. Some of them went to the police. Detective McSmock was assigned to the case. He listened to their story. He scratched his chin. He said. I think Miss Nelson is missing. Detective McSmock would not be much help. Go figure. Other kids went to Miss Nelson's house. The shades were tightly drawn, and no one answered the door. In fact, the only person they did see was the wicked Miss Viola Swamp coming up the street. If she sees us, she'll give us more homework. They got away just in time. Thank God for that. Maybe something terrible happened to Miss Nelson. Maybe she was gobbled up by a shark, said one of the kids. But that didn't seem likely. Sharks, very unpleasant. Maybe Miss Nelson went to Mars, said another kid. But that didn't seem likely either. I know, exclaimed one know-it-all kid. Maybe Miss Nelson's car was carried off by a swarm of angry butterflies. But that was the least likely of all. They They don't look angry to me. The kids in room 207 became very discouraged. It seemed that Miss Nelson was never coming back, and they would be stuck with Miss Viola's swamp forever. They heard footsteps in the hall. "Here comes the witch," they whispered. "Hello, children," someone said in a sweet voice. "It was Miss Nelson! Hooray! 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 Hooray!" Okay. "Did you miss me?" she asked. "We certainly did," cried all the kids. "Where were you?" "That's my little secret," said Miss Nelson. "How about a story hour?" "Oh, yes!" cried the kids. Miss Nelson noticed that during story hour, no one was rude or silly. "What brought about this lovely change?" she asked. "That's our little secret," said the kids. Aww. Back home, Miss Nelson took off her coat and hung it in the closet, right next to an ugly black dress. When it was time for bed, she sang a little song. "I'll never tell," she said to herself with a smile. Like, that's a twist. P.S. Detective McSmock is working on a new case. He is now looking for Miss Viola Swamp. The end. Now, on to the second one. Miss Nelson is Back by Harry Allard, illustrated by James Marshall. You ready? All right, let's begin. One Friday, Miss Nelson told her class she was going to have her tonsils out. "I'll be away next week," she said, "and I expect you to behave." "Yes, Miss Nelson," said the kids in 207. But at recess, it was another story. "Wow," said the kids. "Miss Nelson is away. We can really act up." "Not so fast," said a big kid from 309. "Haven't you ever heard of Viola Swamp?" "Who?" said Miss Nelson's kids. "Miss Swamp is the meanest substitute in the whole world," said the big kid. "Nobody acts up when she's around." "Ooh," said Miss Nelson's kids. "She's a real witch," said the big kid. "Ooh," said Miss Nelson's kids. "I'll just bet you get the swamp," said the big kid. Speaking of which, he looks very much like this kid from the original book. What do you think? But that's just me. On Monday morning, Miss Nelson's kids were all in their seats. They were very nervous. Some of them had not slept well all weekend. "If we get the swamp, I'll just die," said one kid. They heard footsteps in the hall. Slowly the knob turned, and the door opened. It was Mr. Blansworth, the principal. "I shall note the Hawaiian tie. "I shall personally take over this class," he said. Miss Nelson's kids were so relieved. But they soon learned that Mr. Blansworth was not a lot of fun. And judging by the sound of his last name, I'm sure he's pretty bland. All morning, Mr. Blansworth tried to amuse the class with his corny card tricks. "Oh, brother," said the class. That afternoon, Mr. Blansworth showed the class his favorite shadow pictures. "This is kid stuff," said the class. "Well, you are kids." The next day, Mr. Blansworth demonstrated his favorite bird calls. They were not a success. And for 2 days, Mr. Blansworth showed slides of his goldfish, Lucille. Miss Nelson's kids had never been so bored. Told you he was bland. While dusting erasers in the schoolyard, 3 of the ringleaders of 207 discussed the situation. "Something will have to be done," they said. "We must get rid of Blansworth." And they hatched a plot. After school, they painted and sewed and borrowed some old clothes. And they practiced some very difficult stunt work in the backyard. The next day, they weren't in class. "That's too bad," said Mr. Blansworth. They'll miss all the excitement. Mr. Blansworth was about to show the class his collection of ballpoint pens from all over the world when someone came to the door. Slowly the knob turned, and the door opened. Oh, look, said the class. Miss Nelson is back. A tall and lumpy Miss Nelson tottered into the room. Mr. Blansworth was surprised. You're back sooner than we expected, he said. The tall and lumpy Miss Nelson didn't speak. Said the kids. Her throat must still be sore. Are you sure you're well enough, said Mr. Blansworth. She's sure, said the kids. Well, in that case, said the principal, I'll be getting back to the office. Nice to have you back, Miss Nelson, and he left the room. Seriously, how gullible can you get? Hot dog, cried the class. We got rid of Blansworth. Now we can do it just as we please. And at the stroke of 10, the kids from 207 left the building. No one stopped them. They went straight to the movies where they saw The Monster That Ate Chicago. Twice. This is really living, they said. Afterwards, they went to Lulu's where they stuffed themselves silly. But soon they made a serious mistake. And here it is. Heading back to school, they passed Miss Nelson's house. Miss Nelson couldn't believe her eyes. Those are my kids, she said in a scratchy voice. What are they doing out of school? And who is that with them? Miss Nelson telephoned Mr. Blansworth to see what was going on. You're not Miss Nelson, said Blansworth. Miss Nelson is back. And he hung up. Can't fool me, he said. Seriously, how gullible is this guy? Said Miss Nelson. Something will have to be done. And she went to her closet. Back in 207, Miss Nelson's kids were spending an agreeable afternoon. They were pleased with themselves. We should do this more often, they said. They did not notice the figure out in the hall. Slowly the knob turned and the door opened. Uh-oh. My name is Viola Swamp, said the lady in a scratchy voice. Yipes, cried the kids. The swamp. That's right, said Miss Swamp. And I'm here to whip this class into shape. Get back to those desks on the double. The class did as it was told. The big kid from 309 was certainly right. Miss Swamp was a real witch. Look at their epic faces. She knew how to get results. The class did a whole week's work in no time. We shouldn't have gotten rid of Blansworth, they said. Pipe down, said the Swamp, or... Just then something under a desk attracted her attention. It was a mask. Aha, said Miss Swamp. So that's your little game. And she tried on the mask, just as Mr. Blansworth stepped into the room. Miss Nelson, said Blansworth, I'm of the opinion that someone has been impersonating you. Uh-oh, whispered the kids. You don't say, said Miss Swamp. Probably just some kids acting up. I'm sure it won't happen again. And Mr. Blansworth left. And it won't, will it, said Miss Swamp to the class, because the swamp will be watching. A minute later, Miss Nelson appeared. I'm back, she said. Hot dog, cried the kids. Are we glad to see you? Didn't you have fun with Mr. Blansworth, asked Miss Nelson. Said the kids. They decided not to mention Miss Viola Swamp. But they also wondered why Miss Nelson hadn't seen her in the hall. They never knew what hit them. Then again, she said she would never tell. And now we come to the third book. Miss Nelson Has a Field Day. Written by Harry Allard and illustrated by James Marshall. You ready? All right. Let's begin. For some weeks now, gloom had blanketed the Horace B. Smedley School. No one laughed or threw spitballs. No one even smiled. Miss Nelson was worried. Twins. Everyone was down in the dumps. Even the cafeteria ladies had lost their sparkle. Lois, Peg, and Sue. Hamburgers again today. Mr. Blansworth was so depressed he hid under his desk. "It's the worst team in the whole state," he said. And it was true. Identical twins. The Smedley Tornadoes were just pitiful. They hadn't won a game all year. They hadn't scored even a single point. And lately they seemed only interested in horsing around and in giving the coach the business. "Why practice?" they said. "We'll only lose anyway." "We're in for it now," said old Pop Hansen, the janitor. "The big Thanksgiving game is coming up, and the werewolves from Central are real animals. They'll make mincemeat out of our team." "What's to be done?" said Miss Nelson. "We need a real expert," said Pop. That afternoon, while Miss Nelson was grading papers, she heard wild laughter. It was coming from the teacher's lounge. Coach Armstrong had cracked up. "I'll make us a fresh pot of coffee," said Miss Nelson. When Coach had calmed down, Miss Nelson took him home in a taxi. "You need a nice long rest," she said. The next day it was announced over the PA system that Coach Armstrong would be out for a long time with the measles. "Who will take his place?" said the kids. When Miss Nelson passed by Lou's after school, a serious discussion was going on. "We need someone who can really get the team into shape for the big Thanksgiving game," said one kid. "Someone who knows how to get results." "It's too bad Miss Viola Swamp isn't around," said another. "Who?" said a kid who was new in town. "You've never heard of Viola Swamp?" said the first kid. "The meanest substitute in the whole wide world. She's a real witch. She'd have no trouble getting the results." Mr. Blansworth happened to overhear. He said. There he is. I really love those expressions James Marshall makes, like, said Miss Nelson, and she wasted no time getting home. After rummaging around in her closet, she found what she was looking for, an ugly black sweatsuit. Then she made an important phone call. "I'll be right there," said the voice at the other end. The next day, Mr. Blansworth announced that there would be football practice as usual. "Whoever it is," said the guys, "let's really give him the business." The doors to Coach's office flew open, and out stepped a lady in an ugly black dress. "My name is Viola Swamp," said the lady, "and I am here to get results." "It's Blansworth!" cried the guys, and they laughed him off the field. "Oh, rats," said Blansworth. "How could they tell?" We can still see your mustache, and then you're in a poorly made witch costume." Just then the guys heard the sound of squeaky tennis shoes. "I am Coach Swamp," said the lady in the black sweatsuit. "Coach, and don't you forget it." "Holy smoke!" cried the team. "The Swamp!" The team's fullback tried to pussyfoot away. "Not so fast, Mr. Marty," said Coach Swamp. "Wow," said one of the guys. "Did you see that tackle?" Coach Swamp was a real expert. She put the team to work right away. The guys had never done so many leg raises. "More," said Coach Swamp. They had never run so fast. "Faster," yelled Coach Swamp. "This is murder," said the guys. "Pipe down," said Coach Swamp. In only a matter of days, the Smedley Tornadoes were looking better. Coach Swamp really gave them the business. Mr. Blansworth was a little puzzled, however. "Who is that Miss Swamp?" he said. "Maybe Miss Nelson knows. I'll go ask." Miss Nelson was busy grading papers when Blansworth looked in. I don't want to disturb her, said Blansworth. She probably doesn't know anyway. Wait a minute. But, Down on the field, Coach Swamp was having a little talk with the team. And don't ever think you can horse around again, she said, because the swamp will be watching. When Coach Armstrong returned after his rest, he was very surprised by what he found. The guys played like a real team. How did this happen? Said Coach Armstrong. Said the guys. Wait a minute. But I thought... This is odd. On Thanksgiving Day, the Tornadoes clobbered the Werewolves 77-3. It was a great day for the Horace B. Smedley School. Aha. Mr. Blansworth treated the whole team to hot dogs at Lulu's. Miss Nelson went home tired and happy. Ah, ha, 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 ha. This explains everything. Sometimes you just have to get tough, she told her sister Barbara. And by the way, thanks for filling in for me. Anytime, said Barbara. Anytime. The end. I'll see you next time on Storytime with Eric Zimmer. Take care.